Hey everybody, I'm so excited to kind of launch two things today. One, the HighGround Network, which is going to feature a lot of content made by veterans and athletes that we get to work with down here at the Ready Lab. And then two, specifically the Pursuing Elite podcast. And I wanted to slow down enough to introduce the listeners and the viewers to Ross Blankenship and Boston Gilbert, two great friends that I get to do this with, amongst other really amazing people I get to work with every day, and really talk about pursuing the lead and kind of how it came to be and what the end state for the podcast is. And there's no better way to do that than invite the guys that are helping me host it, learn about it themselves. So with that, like here we are, Pursuing Elite Podcast right. 001.
Very exciting.
It's outstanding. Ross Blankenship, decorated Army veteran, pretty amazing documentary called Restrepo. Ross fought in that with some amazing friends that we're all collectively close with, and Sebastian Younger wrote about it in the book Tribes, and then we've worked together for almost 7 years.
Yeah, long time.
Right?
Yeah.
And then Boston Gilbert, pretty amazing guy. He's got an incredible story, a member of Gold Star family. Your father's story is worth giving a whole podcast too, so I don't want to.
We have.
I don't want to. But his father was spectacularly heroic. Saved a bunch of our friends in November 27, 2006. Major Troy Gilman, F-16 pilot, and I've got to know you and your brother, and can't wait to meet the rest of your family. But just got done playing at SMU, and now at Dallas Baptist University, getting your leadership degree, and fundamentally Pursuing Elite as the keynote presentation came out of. How do I distill the soft skills and experience that I gain on the ball field and the battlefield and package them in such a way that they're relevant in the boardroom, right?
Right.
So that's kind of one of the ways that the whole thing kind of got started. And the presentation kind of organically built itself over time. I mean, there's pursuit points that you'll ask about here in a second. Yep. I know you're curious about one in particular. That they almost kind of built themselves as I was getting asked a question at the president. Like, I love the Q&A. Like, the Q&A for me is so fun because all the speeches is your best guess at the question someone would ask you. So, like, you just let them ask you. It, like, makes the whole thing a lot simpler, right? So a lot of the content was developed over years of just listening to athletes and executives just ask questions, right, and help me mine that experience I've been fortunate enough to have. So,
yeah, can you explain Pursuing a Lead?
Yeah,
and how it originated, and what we can expect on the podcast.
Sure. So, Pursuing Elite, like I said, I started getting asked to speak for corporations. I didn't know you could do that. It's actually not really that flattering of a story. So, Roger Staubach, who I've known Roger since the early 90s, and I've been waiting for him to not be perfect, and it's not happening. It's super frustrating. It's like Captain America. And he really is wonderful. And he called me one time, and he goes, "Hey, would you come speak to the Cowboys and want your honorarium?" And I said, "I'll come speak to the Cowboys, but it's not an honor." He's like, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, you asked me, would it be an honor to speak to the Cowboys?" I was like, "That's not what I said at all." I said, "What's your honorarium?" I said, "What's an honorarium?" He goes, "It's a fee." I'm like, "People pay you to talk?" He's like, "Yeah." I was like, "Oh, yeah, holy smokes." So I went and spoke, and it was easy because I'd been there. I'd been one of them. And I was like, man, what would I have wanted to know when I was them, right?
Right.
And the NFL was there, some really great leaders in the NFL. They were creating they were building this player engagement program, which is, the theory is, and it's a very true theory, is your career can last a lot longer when you're not worried about what happens after your career.
Right.
And you know that as an operator. So
sure.
When you have some questions about tomorrow, answer today, you tend to take today at its face value and fight it well. And then that turned into relationships with a lot of the NFL teams, and then the corporate sponsors, and then amazing companies like J.P. Morgan and Merrill Lynch, Bank of America, and Quicken and Troy.
How did you get in with? What was your segue into the business side?
It was another company that asked me to do it. Like, I didn't know how to, and I still really don't know how to.
So they approached you.
Yeah, so they're like, "Hey, would you come and speak here?"
Wow.
And there were some pretty forward-thinking leaders, not because they found me, but because they're like, "Hey, I want to get atypical presenters," and this was in 2008, 9, 10, right?
Okay.
So you had a lot of these people coming back with this pretty remarkable experience and pretty effective at communicating. Like, that's one of the things for me. Like, y'all know this. We love building and leading businesses. that allow us to work for and with the best leaders in America and create amazing careers for veterans and athletes as they transition
Right.
from the ball field and the battlefield. And one of the ways we do that is you look at the hard skills, soft skills, and experiences of veterans athletes, and you distill those into these kind of aim small, miss small value propositions that leaders need. And leadership is this kind of transcendent thing. Like it's relevant on the ball field, on the battlefield, the boardroom, and the breakfast table. So
Right.
there's some shareable knowledge. And I mean, there's almost really a moral and ethical obligation to share what probably the most ruthless terrain, which was battlefield,
Yeah.
taught you, right? Like, you want to build a family that you love, that loves you, and that matters to others with the same urgency that you have on the battlefield, right?
Yeah, we definitely could take, some of our experiences
Yeah.
and extract those from the military and deployments and sprinkle them around our everyday lives.
And that's what's so encouraging for me, because when I take a veteran to go speak with me, and I'll do it, and I'll shape a Q&A like, hey, that's a great question. Why don't you answer that?
Sure.
And guys will be like, and then they just wade into this eloquent, incredibly meaningful, relevant insight on that particular question.
They probably didn't even know that they had.
100%. And
Yeah.
then they didn't, and then all of a sudden they're getting launched as a potential speaker and a contributor
Sure.
and hold fast and some of these other things.
Yeah.
So my desire was to create opportunities for other veterans and athletes by sharing with the boardroom what the battlefield and the ball field had taught us.
Wow, that's nice. I think, and plus what you get to do for veterans, being able.
Yeah, man. I mean, you take care of the boys take care of you.
That's really what drives you, is it
Yeah,
not?
yeah. I mean, you don't ever have to stop serving. You change how and where you serve. You may switch maps, but that desire to serve those who serve alongside you and with you, like that's pretty persistent, at least in me and in most guys I know, most men and women I know as they transition, is finding ways to continue to build into the people and the places that built us.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get that. It sounds like you're kind of flipping the script almost, because these companies are hiring you
Yeah.
to speak to them.
Yeah.
And in return,
About businesses I know nothing about.
yeah, exactly.
As a failed wealth manager, let me tell you how to do that really well, right?
That was years ago, Clint.
It was a fleeting dance with that industry,
Yeah.
which I was not nearly
But now we
smart
get to,
enough
to turn the tables and invite some of America's.
Yeah.
I mean, who are the prospective interviewees?
Yeah, I mean,
your
that's
guests?
what's so exciting. So in pursuing elite, and why we call it that, is there's these 5 outcomes. And Ross, you know this, like when you have time, you can look at data charts, game film, all this other stuff. When you got no time
Right.
and you got to decide what to do next, you distill whatever just happened into one word so you can figure out what to do. So whatever it was bad, it was average, it was good, it was excellent, or elite.
Okay.
When I say pursuing elite, what I'm talking about is the people that I've always wanted to be around who just don't rest on the X.
Yeah.
Like you get to the X, and one of the, all our units have great sayings, but one of the sayings in the SEAL team's the only easy day was yesterday, right?
Okay.
And what it means is like, hey, unless the bad guy's done, you're not done.
Okay.
And the bad guy's never going to be done, so you're never done.
Sure.
Right? And so you get to the X, and people hug and they high five and they celebrate. They rest, they recover, and they revel, which we all have to do.
Sure.
I think performance science is over and over reaffirming that we have to rest and we have to be deliberate about that. And we have to recover, which is rest is passive, recovery is active. How do we feed our soul and fill our minds? And then revel is how do we, recharge communally? Like how do you and I get fired up to go do this really hard thing again?
Sure.
But the split happens there. And once you rest, you recover, and you revel. There's some who relax, and there's some who reload. And I want to be around the reloads. I want to be around the not done kind, right?
Wow.
Yeah.
And so, that's why we call it pursuing elite. And elite is this mythical ridgeline that, frankly, you never really get to. It's just further than what you thought was excellent yesterday, right?
Oh wow. Yeah.
So those are the outcomes.
You
And
kinda
that's
moved
what- that
the
was
goalpost
that was the
back.
origin
Yeah.
of pursuing elite. Like as a sniper, were you ever going to be good enough? No, you're always going to see how good you can be, right?
That was pretty good though.
You're really good. I mean, you're better than me, right?
Yeah.
And as a soccer player, like, am I going to be fast enough? Like, there's these things that you can't imagine ever be done doing, right? And that for me, when I have that, I'm just more of the guy Amy said I do too,
Yeah.
and the dad my girls deserve.
Oh
right?
wow. Yeah.
So that's kind of what pursuing elite has always been, and
Yeah.
kind of explored that terrain between done and not done. Like the difference between being excellent elite is, are you done or are you not done?
Right.
Yeah, and I think one thing that stands out to me is what you just did for 5 minutes is you connected these different planes,
Yeah.
whether it be service via military or with our families or boardroom, you have your different maps. And
Yeah.
I think that one of the most attractive facets to your model, Clint, that you've kind of developed and tweaked and ran with is the
or stumbled
transcendence of it.
into, or Forrest Gumpian about
Or
way into.
stumbled into. Yeah. Is you mentioned that word transcendence earlier in
Yeah.
the podcast. And I think that you're able to connect these different planes, share that with people, and then they feel that interconnectedness with other people. So that's how a veteran is able to connect and learn something from an athlete or from a business leader or from a wife or a husband or a daughter. And I think that it's human. And I think that's one of the most powerful aspects to your model of leadership.
Yeah, listen, there's horrors on the battlefield, right? And it's not about redeeming that whole space, but when you learn something from the battlefield that helps you at the breakfast table, there's a moment of redemption. Like what only cost your soul and your mind and your heart for so long now actually, is redeemed a little bit because you use that thing to better someone you care about, right? And that's I've always felt really passionate and not obligated. That's a low word, but I feel so fortunate to learn kind of all these different maps. And I've lived on these maps, right? And now to kind of share what's transcendent of each map that can benefit each other. It's like water's relevant. It's like, vanilla is the most popular favorite because it goes with everything. It's like Brian Regan talks about the cranberry guy, cranberry and everything. Cranberry, so there's these cranberries that are good in anything, and how do we share those collectively with each other?
Let me ask you, you had mentioned a couple times now pursuit points.
Yeah.
Can you briefly go over and describe some of these points?
Sure. So what we say in pursuing elite is there's 5 outcomes: bad, average, good, excellent, and elite.
Right.
And the difference between being excellent and elite is, are you done or you're not done yet?
Okay.
And you can be elite if you're not done yet, right?
Sure.
So what are you not done doing?
Right.
And the pursuit points kind of came out of that. And what we say in the pursuit points is there's really 5 of them. And these aren't gifts and abilities. Like it's like the 5 gifts of elite achievers.
Yeah.
And the gifts is in like the single apostrophes. I don't know what you call those things. Like the up commas. They're not called up commas, but you know what I'm talking about. And the high commas. And, we're gonna get some comments on that one, I'm sure, coming from my English teacher in high school, or Nene. Nene will correct me on that. But they're not gifts, right? They're just decisions and disciplines. And so for me, the pursuit points, there's 5 of them, and their elites are balanced. They create high ground for hard days. Elites are curious. They want to find out. They don't want to be found out. Elites are tribal. They know they need something more than themselves, do something bigger than themselves.
Okay.
Elites are intentional. They always know why they're doing what they're doing.
Sure.
And elites are authentic. They preach from their pain and they share their scars.
Wow.
So those are the pursuit points that we get to dive deeply
But
into.
these are really attributes of,
100%.
of just very quality, solid leaders. It's what you kind of look for.
Well, let's unpack leader too, because I think you would agree with this. I define leading and leaders like I hate it when, are you a leader or a manager? As though manager is a bad word. Manager is an amazing word.
Yeah.
Like it's important, right? Stuff's got to get managed, right? So for me, leading is a verb. If you're leading, you're a leader. If you're swimming, you're a swimmer. If you're diving, you're a diver. Leading is fundamentally an action, right?
Yeah.
Now, positional authority is action plus oversight, resource, accountability, and encouragement.
Okay.
And then command has probably never been less about actual tactical action and more about oversight, encouragement, resourcing, and total accountability, right? So the reason I say that is everybody's a leader. You don't get to say I'm not a leader, right?
Yeah.
And if you're a leader, you got to pay attention to outcomes. And if you pay attention to outcomes so you can figure out what to do next. And these attributes are relevant regardless of what stage you're in.
Well, even the low guy on the totem pole, even if he's doesn't have anyone direct reporting to him, he can exhibit these traits and be leading by example.
What was your rank when you started carrying the radio?
4?
Yeah, E4 carrying a radio.
Yeah. I didn't really understand at the time how
the radio is everything.
Yeah, it's your only lifeline.
The radio is all, right? Like
you
you protect the comms guy.
Yeah.
Let
me tell you this
and
story.
then the funny guy.
We had the radio go down on a mission,
That's bad.
and they chalked an Apache to us. We got back to the base to talk to the radio to the base. Said, "Hey, we're having comms problems." Then comms go down. They chalked an Apache to us, and he literally hovered over us as we walked. Like 3 miles.
You got to up radio.
Yeah.
Just like the up comma.
Yeah, and
but it had guns and missiles.
Absolutely, yeah. What will you think? If you were to kind of what pursuit point interests you the most?
That's a great question. So I'll punch that over to you. But here's a quick disclaimer on the pursuit points. They're not linear or sequential.
Okay.
It doesn't go balance and curiosity and then intentionalism.
Sure.
Well, the way I look at them is they're like 5 lanes on an interstate to where you said you want to go. At any given time, one may be more dominant than the other.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
But they all matter, and depending on what you're doing, what life stage you're in, there's one that's going to be particularly relevant. Like, I hear a lot of questions about balance, right?
Sure.
Having high ground for hard days, and then so there's no wrong answer to that. Right?
Yeah. I just wanted to know what one was more of a catalyst for you, So when I think about it, like now, like you said, the seasons of life, and
Right.
I look at like my folks,
Yeah.
and at this point in life, they're all about tribalism. They're all
Yeah.
about the family, keeping everybody together.
That's right.
When another time in their life, they might have been striving for balance, and like my wife and I do, we strive for balance in
Mm-hmm. Sure.
everything we do. Especially
Being high ground for each other, because you
Yeah.
never know when you're going to have a hard day.
Oh yeah.
Like, that's the thing about balance is like, hey, if you're doing a hard thing, you're going to have a hard day. And if you have that high ground,
Yeah.
faith and family and friends and people, places and processes, they remind you who you are, what you're about, and why you started doing the hard thing in the first place.
Yeah.
Then that hard day just stays a hard day, and it
Yeah.
doesn't turn bad. And I don't care who you are, you can't take a lot of bad days. You can take a lot of hard days.
Yeah.
You got high ground,
Yeah.
but you can't take many bad
Yeah.
ones.
Bad days are
right?
hard to live.
So yeah, for me, and Boston, you and I were talking before this, and you mentioned one that was particularly relevant to you for your season.
Yeah, I think this is like a good little case study of what you're talking about.
Yeah.
But because I think that what y'all were both hitting on was it's contextual.
Yeah.
All these models are contextual, and also it's like not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. So there's a tension on all of them,
Yeah.
and an emphasis on one in
Yeah.
any particular.
It's kind of a
season.
starfish.
Wow.
I mean,
Kinda
they're all
what I'm hearing.
There's 5 legs on a starfish. They're all
Right.
relevant, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And in some ways, each spawns the other. In some ways,
yeah, definitely. I think for me, for example, young 20s,
Yeah.
curiosity is a big one. Because
Well, for
it's kind of,
sure.
I mean, everything's
Yeah.
opening up, and
so
there's
listen, I've few regrets. Like most of the mistakes I made, and I've made a ton of them. As I look back on them as like inflection points and reset points and opportunities to learn. So regret is where you can mine your past experiences for when that I wish I would have or I wish I wouldn't have. Right? I have more I wish I wouldn't have than wish I would have. I tend to kind of swing hard. And but one of the regrets I have is as a young man not asking as many questions as I should have and not listening as long as I should have, right?
Yeah.
And there's times, not having a father and being the oldest son where I just had told myself it wasn't okay to ask questions. And what's interesting is when you're saying that it's not okay to ask questions, what you're saying is it's okay to make mistakes. And sometimes that's true, but sometimes it's not. Like if I get a scar that someone has that I could have learned from and spared my bride and our children that pain, then man, that's kind of on me. So for me, curiosity, the way I describe curiosity, so all of them are co-equal in their significance, but I do believe one is a catalyst to all others, and that is curiosity. As a talent aggregator, for me, I look for the absence or presence of curiosity. Because if you're not curious, what you're saying is I'm perfect or I'm done. And you can't be perfect. So
Yeah.
now you're a liar or you're lazy.
We were
Like,
having a
which one is it?
conversation about that yesterday, and it was like the moment where you say, I'm done, stop learning, I'm no longer curious, I don't want to be, or I don't want to listen to anybody else. It's almost like you're putting yourself in a hole and shutting
That's it.
a
You're
hatch
shutting
over
down.
you. It's like, I'm done.
Man, I had a
nothing else-
conversation with an amazing athlete, and in his sport, he is a premier athlete, and he just wasn't asking questions. So I said, hey man, I got a question for you, and he goes, yeah. I said, listen, you're not curious, which means you're perfect or you're done. And listen, that's okay. It's okay as long as 2 things. 1, no one comes along who's as good as you, or 2, the game doesn't change. And there may be, it's possible to consider that no one will come along with your like symphony of gifts, right? But the game's changing just between last week and this week.
Sure.
So it's just a matter of
Just
time
progressing.
before you're an antique.
Wow.
And I mean, I didn't embarrass him. I pulled him off the side. What I found is he was incredibly curious, but he'd always been the best. So
Yeah.
he didn't. He always felt like he had to set the example, and he always felt like he had to have an answer. And he kind of came from a family of origin that was a little bit maybe like mine, where I just everybody's looking at me for an answer. Not everybody. I don't want to sound remarkable about it, but when you're expected to have an answer, you forget to be able to, who do you ask questions to? And that fundamentally brings us back to the whole kind of point of Pursuing Elite. Like, the whole point of Pursuing Elite podcast is, man, for more than a decade, I've had an opportunity to go and visit with the most remarkable companies and their people, and I've learned so much, right? And the one thing I constantly mourn, because I travel aggressively, I mean, I'll do Seattle and back in a day from Dallas, because I told my daughters, like, hey, I'll kiss you good night or kiss you good morning, right? So I'll leave in the morning, go speak, and then come back, and you get back at dark, whatever, take your kids to school, and then just come up here and be a jerk at work the rest of the day, right?
You're right.
But I never get enough time to learn from the people that I'm speaking to. Like, they listen to me, but I don't get to listen to them.
Yeah.
And I'll come in on the tail end of a presentation of a head coach, and I'll just be like, oh, man, where's the rest of that? Or like our first guest that everybody gets to hear from, Lisa Atherton, who's just amazing. Like, the first time I met Lisa and I listened to her, just the way that she led and her story, and I'm sitting there, I was like, man, I want my daughters to meet Lisa. And for me, the podcast is a way for me to introduce my daughters to Lisa Atherton and Jill Ellis, the head, maybe one of the greatest soccer coaches of all time, certainly in women's soccer, 2-time U.S. Women's National Team leader. Like, I remember when I visited with it, that's one of the only reasons my daughters think I'm cool, is I've spoken to Vineyard Vines multiple times in U.S. Women's National Team. My daughter's like, Dad, if you speak to Alex Morgan at Vineyard Vines, but like Shepany and Murray, the CEOs, they're incredible. And their story, the origin story of Vineyard Vines, like, man, there's 80% of that you can take and plug in your own life and just be better. Like, they made ties. It was one of the simplest things they could make, because they wanted to spend more time with their dad. Like, and so for me, at the end of the day, I'll confess this: Pursuing Elite podcast is an extremely selfish endeavor, because I want to learn more from the people that had to listen to me.
Oh, wow.
And I want to ask them the questions they asked me, because I'm still curious, man. Like, I don't know that I've ever been as curious as I am right now.
Sure.
And that's, as a young man, the gift I'll give you is you don't want to be in your mid-40s wishing you would ask more questions, right? And bearing the scars of not having asked them, right? And so when I talk about curiosity is a creator. It's going to create something that you're proud of. It's a catalyst. It's going to get you to where you say you want to go faster. And it's a complacency killer. And complacency is a killer. Like, it's a killer. Like, we know this. We say this all the time. Like, hey, complacent and curiosity and complacency are incompatible. They're mutually exclusive, right? So when you choose curiosity, you're squeezing complacency out the door, right? And so you're performing at a really high level for a really long time, but you're attracting people that want to create something that they're proud of and want to get as good as they can be as fast. And that's just a good day at work, man, when you're surrounded by. So for me, again, they're all relevant and significant and within context. But for me, curiosity is, man, it's the light. It's the match that lights the fuse for all the other ones, right? And it's an indication that the person you're around may not be equally yoked in desire, if they're not want to learn as much about themselves and you and the endeavor as you do, right? So for me, I do look at curiosity. The absence of curiosity is as a compatibility. For me, it's a compatibility filter.
Sure. Well, it sounds like,
unless we're talking about gluten. We're talking about gluten or paleo, like, I'm not curious about. The cavemen are dead. Like, why do we aspire to eat like a dead? Hey, let's eat like T-Rexes. They're dead. I don't want to eat like something that's dead. Like, let's pick something that's like pandas. I want to eat like a panda, because those suckers are happy every day.
Yeah.
And they've been around for a long time.
There you go. Well, it sounds like you got some interesting
Go
stuff.
Po. Kung Fu Panda.
We've got some awesome stuff coming up on
we
Pursuing
do.
Elite.
We have some excited about your show, The Decisive Point.
Yeah.
Excited about the ologies. The ology's been really, really fun. The Silverback Sessions, which is what I've learned as we've designed this network, is the Silverback Sessions is just really a way for D. White and some of y'all to harness my ADD. And like, hey, that's a good topic. Let's talk about it in the Silverback Sessions, which is kind of hurtful, but I get it.
Yeah.
And then the Ready Lab, which is the stuff we do up here. So yeah, Pursuing Elite podcast. It's fun. I'm excited to have you guys on it as well. I think you loved interviewing Lisa. She's incredible. And so we've got a great roster of guests on the Pursuing Elite podcast.
For sure. Wow.
So, hey, where are we at, Dwight? We're pretty good. We're pretty good on time. The running joke is for those of you who know, he's not gonna be surprised. Like, hey, can Clint stay on the timeline?
Very
So
true.
we generally did. So again, my name is Clint Breach. For those of y'all who don't know, I'm excited to welcome y'all to the HighGround Network and to the Pursuing Elite podcast and all the other stuff we get to do. Ross, thanks for being here, bud.
I appreciate
It's fun
you
doing
having
this
me.
with You know how to turn all this stuff on.
Yeah, I do.
You
I
learned
do.
it in November when I was like, hey, man. So I don't know how to turn
Yeah.
this stuff
Hey, you got to
on.
start somewhere.
You got to start on.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
the way that you start is with
I was-
delegation.
I was
and
curious.
then, as an officer, you take credit. Like,
Yeah.
look what we did. And Ross was like, we? You're
Yeah.
up there playing solitaire. I'm
Yeah.
up here like, electrocuting myself. Right? And then Boston, I think, is really, one, you provide a unique insight just from your perspective and experience. You kind of have a foot in both worlds. But I also think I really want you to help us stay relevant to what your generation and your demographic thinks is important.
Sure.
Yeah. We're spanning 3 decades here. So
We are.
I figure we got all the.
Let's go.
Old, yeah. That's right.
All right.
When we get a little sweet in here, we got 4 decades.
Yeah,
Some
oh my
real
gosh.
shenanigans. So, hey, thank you for joining. We're excited to introduce you to the rest of the shows. Like, follow, subscribe. Soon you will have a way to join the 21 and None mission. The 21 and None mission is how we're endowing fellowships that allow us to take veterans and effectively transition them into the companies that we lead as a springboard into the great leaders I've met along the way. Like, that's the coolest thing for me is to,
Yeah.
you look at Josh
Sure.
over there at JP Morgan, and he's just crushing it. And,
Yeah.
the people you met when you were with a hedge fund and the quality people over there. And it's really fun. So
Awesome.
thank